Injecting Religion by SurvivalProcedure. All living creatures have DNA. The biological language is the foundation for who we are and what makes you, you. In contrast, non-living things do not inherently contain the same coding that we're given. It is possible, though, to utilize digital information as a foundation of genetic architecture for the purposes of storage. Ongoing studies since 2012 suggest that the future of text storage will be entirely organic. Using this information, in 2017, I embarked on a unique business that encoded the ancient dogma of religious text into macromolecules, and I offered this product to devout customers. I began injecting religion, literally. Using a saline solution, I would transcribe digital letters of the Hebrew alphabet into a nucleotide of a corresponding DNA codon table. I then assembled everything together with amino acids and proteins to create an injectable substance, converted religious text into DNA. The process sounds much more complex than it actually is. Doing this was incredibly cost-effective and allowed for monetary viability with the aid of Vector Builder. This formula was my product that I offered to anyone who held the desire to absorb and fuse themselves with the Word of God. Any God, really. Jesus, Allah, the flying fucking spaghetti monster. I didn't care. The subcutaneous injection had no real effect on human physiology, except an occasional rash from an allergic reaction that would subside after a couple of days. The only real effect was a placebo. The product was meaningless. Human disparity can easily be exploited, and I sought to profit from that disparity. I offered something no one else in the world was offering, an opportunity to become physically divine. Word of my services spread rather quickly, and business was booming. The local churches, temples, synagogues, and mosques ate my product up like candy. Fusing science and religion together, people were convinced my product was recoding their genetic makeup to ensure pathway into heaven. I would charge a price for each injection. $100 for up to 5 passages, $750 for an entire book, and, at a discount, $5,000 for the Bible or Quran in its entirety, administered weekly over a 1-month period. Easy money. With orders piling in, I eventually opened a storefront office with a lab to store the materials needed and a dedicated injection room with comfortable leather couches. I soon became so overwhelmed that I had to hire an assistant, Lauren, to help organize my appointments. She was fascinated by the business I set up, even though she knew there was no real outcome from the DNA I created. As a religious scholar still pursuing her degree, she loved the concept. The job was perfect for her. I was enjoying a lucrative business model and living comfortably for the first time in my life. All the work and effort I put into everything gave me a tremendous sense of accomplishment. Today, the office is closed, all because of a man who called himself Azazel. He set up an appointment at our headquarters in the summer of 2018. Before I injected anyone, I always met with them to discuss the injection and answer any lingering questions they may have had. This meeting was more of a sales pitch, really, an opportunity to eliminate doubts and push the product more. Azazel entered my office one afternoon, arriving 60 minutes early for his scheduled appointment. I immediately felt intimidated by him. He was quite tall, at least 6'5" by my estimate, and incredibly thin, practically skin and bones. Combine his weight with the droopy bags under his eyes, and it was obvious that he was extremely malnourished. "I'm here for my appointment," he announced when he approached the front desk, towering over it in the process and casting a dark shadow on Lauren. I heard his voice from my desk in the adjacent room and wheeled my chair over to observe the man. He spoke with a deep British accent, which was rather peculiar in the Midwest United States. We don't get too many foreigners here. I always considered British accents to be quite vibrant and eloquent, but this man's voice was actually flat and depressing, like a dismal whale calling its lost calf. He cocked his neck to the side and looked as if he were trying to crack his neck, but no pops ever came of it. As he twisted his head, our eyes met. Instinctively, I ducked back into my office. Lauren greeted him, having difficulty pronouncing his name. "Are you Azazel?" he interjected. "Yes, I have you down for 3 this afternoon. You're a bit early, but I think we can squeeze you in ahead of schedule." Lauren began typing at her computer to adjust the itinerary. "Would you be able to provide me with your last name?" "No." "Excuse me?" "I want to speak to him." I peeked back out from my office and saw Azazel pointing a finger in my direction while keeping his head locked on Lauren. I could tell she was frightened by this man. "I'll take care of this, Lauren," I said, while stepping out from my hiding space and approaching the front desk with a forced smile on my face. "How can I help you, sir?" He turned towards me, reached into his coat pocket, and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you." I took the thick envelope from his hands and pried open the flap to examine the contents. Inside was a wad of cash. 50,000, he said matter-of-factly. "That's a down payment." I looked back at him with astonishment. A down payment for what? He raised his arm and held out a USB flash drive. "I need you to inject me with this. No questions." I took the flash drive from his hand and studied it. The device was an ordinary-looking drive without anything out of the ordinary immediately apparent. "What's on it?" "I said no questions," he said, somewhat sternly. "You can translate digital text into DNA, yes?" "Well, yes." "So translate what's on there. There's another 50,000 in it for you once you're done." Who the hell was this guy? He refused to properly identify himself, avoided questions, and somehow had money to throw around like confetti. Committing verbally only, I assured Azazel that I would get to work on the translation and instructed him to return in 3 days. My verbal confirmation was initially one of deceit, though. I had no intention of following through with this order until I inspected the contents of the flash drive. If it consisted of anything illegal, I fully intended on reporting this to authorities. When he left, I returned to my desk and immediately connected the flash drive to my computer. A folder opened containing only one PDF file. That was it. I somewhat expected images of grotesque murder scenes or violent pornography, but it was only one measly file. I double-clicked the PDF and was greeted with a barrage of Latin letters, all aligned in a 36 by 36 grid. The next page of the document contained another grid, as did the next page and the next. Of the 42 pages, 36 pages contained various 36 by 36 grids. The last 6 pages contained a series of what appeared to be chants and prayers written in Latin. O altissime Domine desu meus pater sancte rege te par altissimum nomen tuum agla, ut constringus et compellus et recolcas cor et mentem illis in meum amorum, et ut meam faciet voluntatem in omnibus et per omnia. There were about 4 pages containing variations of this chant. Upon entering the first chant online, I was given this translation. O Most High Lord, my God, Father, Holy King, through your most high name Agla, may you constrain and compel and turn around my heart and mine. Through these in my love, and may it form my will in all things and through all things. All the chants were similar, but each one was directed to a different deity. Agla, Primogenitus, Redemptor, Eli, Eloi, Eustorum, Genitor, Bone, Messias, Panton, Hos. I had never heard of any of these gods before, and searching their names online didn't provide any useful results. Lauren poked her head into my office, appearing with trepidation molding her face. What is it? I don't know, to be honest, I answered, without taking my eyes off the screen. Are you going to translate it for him? I shrugged. I don't see why not. The entire process is meaningless anyway. Aren't you concerned? About what? This is just a bunch of prayers to strange gods. Well, why is he offering to pay so much money for it? Why doesn't he want you asking questions? Don't know, don't care. Just another indoctrinated fool throwing his money away. Let me see the text. Perhaps I'll recognize it. She pulled up a chair and studied the text with me, mouthing the chants to herself in a low mumble. Alderaya sive soiga vocor, she suddenly exclaimed, her voice slightly apprehensive. This is Alderaya sive soiga vocor. You recognize it? The book that kills Soiga. Never heard of that religion before. It's Christian, actually. What? No way. She nodded. It's said that angels revealed this book to Adam in the Garden of Eden. What he's given you is only a portion of it, though. The entire book is a little less than 300 pages long, and this section of it, the series of grids, has never been deciphered. Some of the top mathematicians and cryptologists in the world have taken a crack at it, but no one has been fully successful. Why do they call it the book that kills? Lauren looked away from the computer finally and directly into my eyes. It's believed that death would fall upon anyone who was capable of deciphering the message hidden in the grids, within 2.5 years. The codon table I used previously needed to be adapted for each grid, but I was able to complete the translation into macromolecules after 2 days. During the work, I conducted further research on the Book of Soiga online. Each grid corresponded with a zodiac constellation, a planet in our solar system, and the 4 natural elements. In its entirety, the book was dedicated to performing magic, including instructions and rituals on summoning demons and controlling the universe. The context was somewhat alarming, especially considering the person who provided me with this information, Azazel. It was a complete mystery to me what his motives were. Ultimately, I knew the DNA I created was harmless. Whatever he believed from this text was irrelevant. Azazel was a paying customer. Rather than being frightened of him, I found myself pitying him. Just another person wasting his life chasing false perfection because he's been told that he's not good enough, not worthy. Reality is somehow beyond calculation for the blindness devout. Azazel entered my office 3 days after our first encounter. Lauren and I cleared both of our schedules for the day, anticipating his arrival. When he walked through the front door, I immediately noticed that he appeared even more malnourished than the first time he visited us, like his body was withering away. "Is it ready?" he asked, his voice also appearing frail and weak. I put on my best professional smile. "Yes, Mr. Azazel. Please, follow me to the injection room." He took a step forward and his legs buckled underneath his weight. In order to prevent falling, he reached out and placed his hand on the wall to steady himself. "Are you all right?" I asked. "No questions," he asserted forcefully. I gave him an assuring nod and led him into our injection room, where he plopped himself onto the leather sofa. Once his body hit the cushion, he let out an exasperated breath of air. I stood over him with the syringe in hand. "Where would you like the injection?" "Anywhere," he yelled, erupting into a coughing fit. I rolled up the sleeve of his sweater, revealing a pale arm. Bright veins protruded from underneath his translucent skin and throbbed lightly. I glanced at Lauren and found her filled with concern, staring back at me and mouthing the word, "No." I shook her off. "Relax, Azazel. You're going to feel a slight pinch." The needle pierced his skin, and I injected the DNA into him. He laid on the couch, staring at the ceiling as the fluid entered his bloodstream. Despite my skepticism, a small part of me thought that maybe something significant would happen, that the DNA would have some miraculous impact and cure him of whatever ailment he had. But there was nothing. He held his hands in front of his face and cried. "Your eyes saw my unformed body," he said softly. "All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." We watched him sob, exacerbating the pity I had already felt for him. His arms collapsed onto his chest and he inhaled deeply. Upon exhaling, his body thrust into another coughing fit, violently convulsing his entire body. He then reached into his sweatshirt and pulled out a piece of paper, extending it to me with his last breath. "Is he dead?" Lauren asked, breaking the tension in the room. I grabbed his wrist and felt for a pulse. Yes. Lauren gasped in shock. Oh, was it the DNA? I shook my head, then took the paper out of his hand and unfolded it, my arms shaking in the process. On the paper was a handwritten note I read out loud to Lauren. If you are reading this, the DNA did not save me. 2.5 years ago, I successfully translated the Book of Soiga, and before I perished, I bestowed the task of molding my DNA with its words as a last-ditch attempt to save my life. I am sorry for attempting to save my own life at the expense of yours. I don't understand, Lauren said. What does he mean by at the expense of yours? It took me a moment, but when I finally understood what he meant, I felt my own heart stop beating and a nervous sweat immediately form on my forehead. No. Oh, God, I stammered. In the process of transcribing the Book of Soiga with the codon table and creating the DNA, I had translated its contents into another language. I had successfully deciphered the grids and their message.